sketching coastal trim options for client sunlight spilling through the wide windows, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some instinct made me swipe. The woman's voice on the other end was clipped, efficient. She introduced herself as Melissa from Horizon Credit Recovery and asked for a woman named Taryn Blake. The reason, she said without hesitation, was an outstanding gambling debt totaling $47,000. My hand stilled mid-sketch, the pencil cutting a jagged line across the paper. I told her firmly she had the wrong person and to remove my number, but when the line went dead, the silence in the studio felt heavier than before. I had known Taryn for 2 years. Sharp-tongued, meticulously dressed with an air that suggested she belonged somewhere more important than wherever she happened to be. Cole adored her, and for my son's sake, I had welcomed her into our lives. Perhaps I had also trained myself not to look too closely at what unsettled me. But a debt collector's voice wasn't something I could brush aside. I locked the studio early, crossed the hot Savannah parking lot, and drove home with the number 47,000 ringing in my ears. At the dining room table, I retrieved the wedding binder from its place between my grandmother's china and an old photo album. Contracts for the venue, catering, florals, and photography, all signed in my name, totaled nearly $96,000. Among the receipts Taryn had casually given me weeks ago, I found a slim stack of bank statements. My son's name appeared alongside hers on a joint account I hadn't known existed. The charges were undeniable. Dozens of transactions to online casinos, transfers from Cole's personal account flowing into that joint one, and then vanishing into the same black hole. My stomach turned. It wasn't just her money disappearing. She was funneling his earnings too. The next morning, Cole stopped by for coffee on his way to work, just as he sometimes did when he wanted company before the day began. I tried to ease into the subject, speaking of how money troubles could fracture even the happiest marriages. He brushed it off with a gentle smile, telling me he and Taryn had everything under control. His confidence was unshakable, but that night, a text arrived from him that knocked the breath out of me. I'd rather lose my mother than lose my wife. The sting was sharp but familiar, as if an old wound had been cut open again. I turned to the contracts once more. $96,000 in my name, plus the pearl white SUV I had purchased as their wedding gift, still legally mine. The next morning, I carried everything to my attorney Elias Morton, who confirmed what I already suspected. Every contract, every invoice, every signature was mine alone. I held complete authority to cancel. The penalties would cost me several thousand, but I could salvage the majority. With Elias's calm guidance, I walked out with a clear decision forming in my bones. That same week, I dismantled it all. I called the venue catering, florists, entertainment, and photography. Each conversation ended with me writing penalty fees in red ink, filing emails into a growing folder titled Cancellations. The SUV went back to the dealership. The joint wedding account was closed, its remaining balance transferred into my savings. By the end of 48 hours, I had erased an entire wedding. $8,000 in penalties bought me the peace of reclaiming nearly $100,000 from the grip of someone else's lies. It did not take long for the fallout to arrive. The pounding on my door came that Saturday morning. Taryn stood on my porch, Cole at her shoulder, both radiating anger. She accused me of sabotage, of destroying their future. Cole looked at me as though I had betrayed him, his voice flat with disbelief. I told them I had canceled what I paid for because I would not fund a marriage built on deceit. Taryn scoffed, her eyes sharp as glass, accusing me of jealousy, of resenting the choice Cole had made. Before I could respond, fate handed me an unexpected ally. Our neighbor, Mrs. Aldridge, strolled by with her dachshund, and with casual cheer remarked that she had seen Taryn at the marina days earlier, enjoying herself with another man. The world seemed to hold its breath. Cole blinked at her, confused, reminding Taryn she had claimed to be at a dress fitting that very afternoon. Her denial was brittle too fast, her eyes cutting toward me with venom. Without another word, she stormed off, leaving Cole lingering on the porch, his shoulders heavy with doubt. The days after blurred into muted silence. Cole's calls became fewer, his words careful. Taryn still appeared on his social media feeds, smiling at restaurants, but there was something new in his eyes, a tightness, a flicker of uncertainty. Then one afternoon, a phone call changed everything again. The woman on the other end introduced herself as Rowena Blake, Taryn's cousin. She spoke with a hesitancy that carried weight. This isn't the first time she began, and what followed was a history I could scarcely believe. Rowena told me of Derek Lawson, a former fiancé in Jacksonville. He had put Taryn's name on his accounts, bought her a car, and funded a boutique that never opened. Months before their wedding, he discovered she had drained nearly all of his savings. She left him overnight, cut off contact, and never looked back. Rowena confessed she had overheard Taryn boasting at a barbecue last summer, bragging she had secured her future with a new man from a wealthy family. That man, she was certain, was my son. I scribbled every detail, Derek's name and Rowena's number. When I hung up, the truth sat heavy in my hands, undeniable now. Cole needed to hear it all. When Cole arrived for dinner that Saturday, the table was set simply: roast chicken, green beans, cornbread. No distractions, no guests. We ate mostly in silence, the clink of silverware the only sound. When the plates were cleared, I brought out the folder I had assembled thick with contract statements and notes. I set it in front of him and told him quietly, "This is everything I found, not rumors. Documents, names, dates." He began with the bank statements, his eyes moving down the list of casino charges, the transfers from his own account into the joint one, and the immediate withdrawals that followed. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. I then explained Rowena's call, the story of Derek Lawson, the drained savings, the boutique that never existed. I slid the notepad across to him with Derek's contact information written clearly at the top. For a long time, Cole didn't speak. The silence stretched between us until finally he admitted in a low voice that he had noticed inconsistencies too. Stories that didn't match afternoons she claimed to be somewhere but couldn't prove. "I wanted to believe her," he said softly. So I didn't press. He gathered the papers into a neat stack, his hands steady, though his eyes betrayed a storm. He thanked me, tucked the folder under his arm, and left soon after. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Sometime after midnight, my phone buzzed with a single message. "It's over." I ended it. Relief and sorrow tangled inside me as I set the phone down. The calls began almost immediately the next morning. My sister-in-law rang first, furious, accusing me of destroying Cole's wedding behind his back. She didn't want explanations, only someone to blame. Before the day ended, I had heard from cousins, old friends, acquaintances, all with questions, judgments, or outright criticism. Some sounded curious, others openly hostile. At the grocery store, women I'd known for years lowered their voices as I passed, their eyes following me down the aisle. Gossip was moving faster than truth. Cole wasn't spared either. At work, co-workers asked why the wedding had been canceled, and though he brushed them off with, "It's nobody's business," I could hear the strain in his voice when he called me in the evenings. He was determined not to feed the rumors, but they pressed in regardless. Meanwhile, Taryn kept her social media alive, posting photos of dinners out and events, smiles plastered across her face, though in Cole's eyes, in those pictures, there was a new hollowness. 1 week later, a knock at my door signaled the storm had not yet passed. When I opened it, Cole stood there, his shoulders heavier than I had ever seen them. He came inside without a word and set the folder on the table between us. He told me he had spoken to Derek Lawson himself. Every detail matched what Rowena had warned. Derek had even sent him copies of old bank statements to prove it. The truth had become undeniable, but instead of anger, Cole seemed hollowed out as if he had been emptied by disappointment. We sat together for hours, the conversation circling through anger, grief, and exhaustion. He admitted he had ignored his instincts because he wanted so badly for Taryn to be the one. He had convinced himself that love meant trust, and trust meant silence in the face of doubt. Now, with everything exposed, he was left questioning his own judgment as much as hers. I listened, letting him pour out the words until the weight of them lessened. In the weeks that followed, Cole began to rebuild piece by piece. He paid off what debts remained from the joint account, taking extra shifts and freelance work to do so. For the first time in months, I heard ease in his voice. He wasn't rushing into anything new. A woman from his building had begun joining him for coffee, just conversation and fresh air after work. He told me there was no pressure, no timeline, just company. As for me, the backlash lingered, but slowly the sharpest edges dulled. I threw myself into my garden, where roses climbed higher than they ever had, and mornings were spent pulling weeds in the soft savanna sun. Gossip still followed me, at times, glances in the store, whispered comments, but the sting faded. I knew what others didn't, that every choice I made had been born of love, not control. Cole's life was finding steadier ground, though not without scars. And mine, though quieter, felt rooted again. Protecting the people we love sometimes means becoming the villain in their story until they can see the truth themselves. It was a cost I could bear, even if it meant carrying the blame. But just when the calm began to return, I learned that the storm wasn't over yet. The knock came on a humid Saturday afternoon, sharp enough to make me set down the pruning shears in my garden. When I opened the door, Taryn stood there. She was polished as always, her hair immaculate, her dress fitted like armor, but her eyes carried a frantic edge. For a long moment, we simply stared at one another, until she finally pushed past me into the hallway, her heels clicking against the floor like gunfire. "You think you've won," she said coldly, spinning to face me. "You think you've broken us apart, but Cole still loves me. He'll come back." Her confidence cracked at the edges, though the veneer straining under something rawer. I kept my voice even, telling her that whatever she hoped for was no longer in my hands. Cole had seen the truth himself. She scoffed, pacing, her words tumbling out faster now. "He doesn't understand what he's giving up. Do you know what kind of life I could have given him? Do you know what people like me have to do to survive?" Her voice broke just slightly, then hardened again. "Your meddling has ruined everything." I let her rant until the silence stretched. Finally, I told her that love built on deception couldn't last no matter how carefully she dressed it up. She froze for just a moment, then her face twisted into something darker. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and stormed out the door, rattling on its hinges behind her. I didn't mention the visit to Cole at first. He was already weighed down enough. But within days, she reached out to him as well. Text calls, even waiting outside his office building once. He ignored most of it, but I could see the strain. One night, he showed me his phone, the string of desperate messages growing more erratic. "She won't let go," he whispered. His voice was steady, but I saw the fear beneath it. Eventually, the silence worked. By midsummer, the calls stopped, her presence fading like a storm that had raged itself out. Word reached me through a cousin that Taryn had moved back to Jacksonville, leaving little behind but whispers and debt. Cole seemed lighter, though not untouched. Heartbreak leaves its residue. Time did its work. Cole poured himself into rebuilding not just his finances, but his own sense of trust. He told me once over coffee that the hardest part hadn't been losing Taryn, but realizing how close he'd come to losing himself. He admitted he had wanted so desperately for their love to be real that he ignored every warning sign. "I would have kept walking blind," he said quietly, "if you hadn't stopped me." The community's gossip didn't fade as quickly. Some people still eyed me with suspicion, convinced I had sabotaged a marriage out of jealousy or control. At the grocery store, I felt their glances trail me, but I carried myself with a quiet strength. Truth has its own way of surfacing, and I no longer needed their approval. My garden became my refuge. The roses, heavy with blooms, climbed higher that summer than ever before, as if they understood that beauty thrives even after storms. By autumn, Cole's steps were steadier. The woman from his building, gentle kind, someone who listened more than she spoke, was still in his life. They took things slowly, sharing walks, conversations, laughter that sounded genuine. He didn't call it love yet, but there was ease in the way he spoke of her, an ease I hadn't heard in years. Watching him heal, I realized the quiet power of choosing to act when it would have been easier to stay silent. Looking back, I saw the arc clearly. A phone call from a stranger had cracked open a door I never wanted to look through, but it had revealed a truth I couldn't ignore. I had dismantled a wedding, endured whispers, carried the weight of blame. Yet through it all, the purpose had remained steady, protecting my son from a life that would have drained him of everything he was. Sometimes love is not about approval or applause. Sometimes it is about being willing to stand in the fire for someone else, even when they resent you for it. I had chosen to bear that cost, and in time, Cole began to see it for what it was. Not sabotage, not control. Just a mother's love, fierce and unrelenting, even when misunderstood. Winter came quietly to Savannah, the air crisp, but never biting, the streets lined with live oaks, heavy with moss. By then, the noise of gossip had softened. Those who had been most eager to whisper had found new scandals to chase. I moved through town without the weight of eyes lingering too long, though the memory of that scrutiny would never quite leave me. Cole, too, carried himself differently. He had steadied under the strain, his shoulders less burdened, his voice stronger. One evening, he came by after work, the kind of visit that once had been routine but had grown rare during the months with Taryn. I made him coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table as twilight deepened outside. He spoke of projects at work, of dinners with friends, and eventually of the woman he had been seeing. Her name was Claire. She was thoughtful, he said, someone who never made him feel like he had to prove himself. He didn't call it love yet, but there was hope in his tone, cautious and steady. I listened, smiling, but inside I felt something softer than pride, a deep gratitude. He had not been broken by what happened. Wounded, yes, but not ruined. He was rebuilding on his own terms. And perhaps that was the quiet victory in all of it. Not that I had stopped a wedding, but that he had learned to choose differently. The house itself seemed to reflect the change. The dining room, once covered in piles of contracts and cancellation notes, was now cleared. The binder that had held the evidence of Taryn's betrayal rested at the bottom of my study drawer, filed away like a case closed. My garden thrived in the cooler months, roses trimmed back for spring soil turned fresh. There was a peace in the rhythm of tending to something that asked nothing but patience and care. Still, the memory of that message lingered, the one Cole had sent me on the worst night of it all. I'd rather lose my mother than lose my wife. Those words had cut deep, and though the wound had healed, a faint scar remained. One evening, I asked him about it gently, not as an accusation, but as a truth between us. He grew quiet, setting his mug down, and after a long pause, he said, "I was blind then. I thought loyalty meant never questioning her. I didn't see that I was pushing away the person who's been in my corner my whole life. I can't take back those words, but I want you to know I didn't mean them the way they sounded." Tears stung my eyes, but I managed a smile. I know I told him. And I did. Sometimes love meant surviving the sharpest words until the truth caught up to them. Months later, as spring pushed color back into the city, Cole and Claire came by together for dinner. She was warm with a laugh that filled the room without effort. I watched the way Cole looked at her, not with the desperate intensity he once had with Taryn, but with quiet ease. There was no grand performance, no polished perfection, just two people who seemed comfortable in one another's company. It was enough. After they left, I sat on the porch beneath the soft hum of the evening. The air smelled faintly of jasmine, the garden stretching out in the fading light. I thought of everything that had happened, the canceled contracts, the slammed doors, the gossip, the heartbreak. It had all felt unbearable at the time, but now, looking back, I understood it differently. Protecting someone doesn't always look noble. Sometimes it looks like betrayal in their eyes, like sabotage, like meddling. But love, real love, is willing to carry that burden anyway. Because in the end, it is not about being thanked. It is about knowing that the person you love is still standing still, whole, still able to choose a better path. If you've made it this far into the story, thank you for listening. If it touched you in some way, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe so more stories like this can find their way to people who need them. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to make a hard choice to protect someone you love, even when they didn't understand at the time? I'd love to hear your story.